evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, the largest single-screen drive-in in the United States. We're certainly glad you could be with us this evening, and don't forget the concession stand is open with all kinds of great things to eat and drink. .3 Mahoning Drive-In Radio, your old friend Virgil back once again for another exciting episode of the podcast. As you guys know, the only podcast dedicated to the love and revival of our beloved drive-in culture. Joined as always by my co-host and general manager extraordinaire, Mark. Say hello, my friend.
Hello.
And we are preparing, as a little timestamp, for the 2025 Mahoning Road Show, which takes our love of 35 millimeter, our love of preservation of said 35 millimeter, and the drive-in culture to other indoor 35 millimeter houses. And we're super excited because we're kicking off our road show on February 8th. That is a Saturday at the Union County Performing Arts Center in Rahway, New Jersey, with a double feature from Avco Heaven, the FOG and PHANTASM. And today we are joined by the second vice president on the board of trustees at the Union County Performing Arts Center, the great Irv Hyatt. Welcome, Irv.
How are you guys doing tonight?
So excited to have you. This whole initiative of starting this road show, and really this podcast, was to shine a light on other theaters, other preservation houses, and now that we've been able to line up such a calendar with just under 10 dates, we're so excited to partner up with you guys over at Union County because we have such a crossover of fans, people that come to you guys, make their pilgrimage out to see us and vice versa. So
we're really, really glad to have you. We're one of the only theaters in New Jersey, as you know, that still use 35 millimeter.
Which is a good place to start. Your involvement with, do you guys call it the UCPAC?
UCPAC is the general term.
With the UCPAC, and we will get to that, but let's give people kind of a little bit of history of the UCPAC in general. How long has the history and the theater been there?
Well, we opened in October of 1928. The theater at the time sat about 1,500 seats. During the war, people got a little wider, so it was reduced to about 1,300 seats. It's an acoustically correct theater, which is set up to show both 35 millimeter and 16 when we need to.
Yeah.
And it still has its original 1928 organ, the Wurlitzer, the biggest little Wurlitzer.
I love that so much. That's the push that we've had. And what we're finding is these houses that are still running 35 millimeter naturally are preservation houses and have such a rich history behind them. 28, that's amazing. And you guys are located right there in Rahway. What's the kind of cinematic culture like there?
Oh, the culture is great. We're approximately 3 blocks or so from the railroad, so we do get a lot of New York City. We are near Staten Island due to the Outer Bridge crossing, so we get a lot of Staten Islanders, and we draw from all of New Jersey and sometimes out of Philadelphia, depending on what we're showing.
Yeah, that's what we find is it's not necessarily the locals. People come in from all over the place, but I think when you're doing repertory or shows like you guys do, that's going to be the case. And it's not just film. I take it as a performing arts center. It's a lot of performances and musical acts, things like that coming through town. What's that mix?
Well, that is correct. The majority of our shows are live stage shows between music, comedy, stage shows. But we are really dedicated to the 35 millimeter film format. And that's been a part of us since we've opened back over 97 years ago. And it'll always be a part of us. We'll never give up 35 millimeter as long as there's sprints to run.
That's beautiful. You know, Jeff, our previous owner, who passed away last year, That was always his mantra. The heart and soul of any theater is that 35 millimeter booth. It's the beating heart. And I just love all the work that you guys are doing to preserve it. How often are you guys running 35 millimeter? Is it a weekly thing, special occasions?
Well, it's a monthly thing, and we are generally the third Thursday of the month, but other programming sometimes will interrupt that. But having said it's a monthly thing, a couple of months ago we ran 3 films, so it depends on what we're booked for live and what we can fit into our film
Yeah.
schedule.
Yeah. As far as getting the word out to your audience, do you have like a membership program? What do you find is kind of the best means to kind of get the word out to your audience?
Well, one of the best things people can do is sign up for our email at ucpac.org. That's UCPAC for UCPAC.org. And if they sign up for the email, they will be getting notices of every show.
Well, why don't you give us an idea of before we jump into your history, some of the types of shows that you guys do, maybe some, achievements over the last couple of years or cool shows you guys have done to give people an idea.
Well, you've got to remember, I've been with the theater. Next month will be 25 years.
Amazing.
And I've gone back a couple of years ago. We've had Joan Jett. We just had a revival of the Young Rascals, which are no longer called the Young Rascals. Forgive me, they're called the Rascals now. We've had everybody going back the number of years I've had, from Willie Nelson through George Carlin, and more recently Ice-T, going back a number of years ago. So it's a real eclectic group of people and a real eclectic sound.
What an amazing situation you got there, with people being able to come in and do these shows.
Over the last 25 years, I try to recall, and it's hard to recall. We've had so many good performers.
Yeah, what a treat. What an absolute treat. How many seats do you guys have?
We're at 1,340 seats. There is no balcony. The upper part of the theater is what they call a mezzanine, which is French for we can't afford to build a balcony. So we probably have some of the original stadium seating in the mid-ground of the theater, which is the best place to hear music from. And we still have an orchestra pit, which is occasionally used when we have an orchestra with a live show.
Oh, that's beautiful. Do you guys do any theater acts that come through, like stage shows, theaters?
They're referred to in the theater vernacular as pop-ups.
Yeah.
And probably one of my favorite pop-ups, it's going quite a while ago, but on Golden Pond, where they would come with their own scenery. Their scenery would be hooked into the stage rigging. They would go through the various acts and the various sets. I don't know why On Golden Pond stands out in my mind, but it was a real impressive show. Again, based on the movie, based on the book.
Yeah. See, that I grew up in the theater, and that has been my loves, is just like the theater and then shifted into movies, and like you kind of get best of both worlds there. And music. I was in bands for years, classic rock influence. What a dream.
It is fantastic. Let me tell you a very quick story. You've heard the expression break a leg.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, where break a leg comes from, according to a couple of old vaudevillians I knew, is referring to the curtain legs. We were a vaudeville show that had 2 silent movies, later 2 sound movies with 5 vaudeville acts in between. Well, when the acts would come out and audition, they would have to go past the leg. If the first 5 were hired, they didn't break the leg, so they didn't get paid. So the expression break a leg, the good luck, means get out there, earn your dollar, or you don't go on stage.
How about that? That is incredible. Well, you know it. Our hearts are 35 millimeter. The whole point of the road show is 35 millimeter. I'm curious what projectors you guys have. I take it you also have digital capabilities, or are you only 35 millimeter 16?
At this point, unless it's a special event, we are only 35 millimeter 16. We use solid century projectors
Yeah,
using Christie lamp houses, and we're very modern. We're up to Dolby 2.0 in our sound system.
that is awesome. Well, let's rewind a little bit. 25 years ago, where were you? What got you into this industry? How did you get connected with the Union County?
Oddly enough, the Union County Performing Arts Center was showing 6 Laurel and Hardy silent films
Mm.
with live accompaniment on the Wurlitzer organ. My wife and I went down. I watched it. My wife is not a big movie fan, so she tolerates my love. But I went down there, saw the film, and I saw a sign up requesting ushers. So I said to myself, what a great place. What a nice job this would be to be an usher here.
Yeah.
And when we got involved in the remodel of the theater, I was brought onto the board because I had a little bit of a theater background. And it helped to have somebody that was aware of the history to preserve the theater.
Yeah.
The Union County ended up purchasing the theater from us at a time when we were really down. We're a 501c.
Yeah.
And they put the money in to help us replace the roof and add our new addition without disturbing the historic part of the theater. It's a fantastic arrangement that we've got with Union County.
Yeah, what a perfect situation. So you say know the history. Was this your area growing up, or how long have you been in the area?
I actually live in the town next door. I live in Woodbridge, and we had a theater when I was growing up called the State Theater on Main Street. And that was a 1,200 seat theater. Sadly, by the early 1970s, it had deteriorated to a point where it had to be torn down. But
Yeah.
speaking of the State Theater, that's the topic of my book. My book, Life and Death of a Movie Theater, covers the 10
Yes.
theaters that were in Woodbridge, and it also covers the Woodbridge Drive-In, which, when you see how the history of a drive-in starts, I'm sure your drive-in started very similar.
Yeah, well, what is we are the Drive-In podcast. What is a little bit of that history? We opened in 49, Jersey being the birthplace of the drive-in. Some of them opened for us.
Well, as you know, Camden and Union, I believe Union was the first one and Camden was the second one. Woodbridge was opened in the late 1940s.
Yeah.
And my goodness, I remember as a little kid going to the drive-in. Woodbridge Drive-In had a pony, which the kids who went to see the movies would get a chance to ride. The pony actually was stabled at the base of the screen.
Oh,
We had a snack bar that was unbelievable. I can still taste the pizza and the corn on the cob after all these years.
yeah.
And we had a small patio in the center of the drive-in.
Yeah.
And when you were 11, 12, 13 years old, you didn't drive. So we used to stand in line with the cars. The manager used to let us buy our way in. And we used to sit on the patio and enjoy the movie the
come
entire
on.
night. It was such a great era, the era of the drive-in.
Yeah, then that's really what we're looking to preserve is we always say it was a simpler time, not just for entertainment, but it just takes you back to these memories that you had if you were lucky enough to have one growing up. And I say it's like the fountain of youth. When you drive through a drive-in gate, automatically like it makes your soul feel younger, you know?
Oh, without a doubt.
Your connection there, what exactly do you do as the vice president? Are you part of the programming? Are you part of the just pushing the initiatives or the schedule or?
We have an executive director who works with Danny Newberry, who's been with the theater for years, and she works with the programming for all the bookings. And we have a small film committee
Yeah.
that is keeping the film alive, making the selections of what films they are going to show. And it's had the endorsement through 3 executive directors now. And it's just great because we have everybody from 70 to in their 20s, about 6 people on the film committee. So we get a broad spectrum of what people like.
Yeah. How does like you guys being a 1,600 seat theater, how do you make those decisions? I mean, I'm the booker here as well. Like, how do you make those decisions when it comes to which films to pick? Do you rely upon kind of what I call marquee titles that are going to catch people's eye, or do you like to go with a little more of those deep cut classic era, being the classic theater that you are?
Well, you've got to keep in mind, I'm trying to think, this past October, we ran Friday the 13th, Part 2.
Yep. There you go, baby.
We ran Metropolis.
Mm,
February, we have your show and the FOG and Phantasm, I believe.
yep.
Okay, a good memory. I'm looking forward to seeing it. And March, we have Harold Lloyd, Laurel and Hardy, and Felix the Cat silent with the live Wurlitzer. So
Oh,
the audience reaction is what we end up booking in films. If we have a good turnout for the 80s, 90s horror movies, or a good turnout for the late 20s silent films, we will continue to book that type of film. It's the whole customer. We ran Grease, we've run Dirty Dancing. The interesting with our theater is it's interactive. For the silent movies, we'll have a black and white night. For Grease, we had a dance contest on stage.
well.
Uh, Friday the 13th, Part 2, we had a costume collection.
Little icing
So,
on top. Yeah.
yeah, a little bit of icing on it. We like to see the customers happy, the patrons happy. And it involves them into the actual experience. We can never replicate what we felt when we went to the theaters as a kid,
Yeah.
but that involvement, hopefully for the younger ones, we had Muppet Christmas Carol this season, and we had Kermit the Frog come out between the curtains and speak to Santa Claus.
Oh,
So
come
it's just
on.
you're having fun with the films like they did back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s.
It brings the showmanship back. That's what I love about the drive-in culture. It inherently had this kind of gimmick appeal. You do anything to get people through that gate, you know? And it's kind of the same thing of a certain era with the indoor houses. Nowadays, we talk about this renting a seat, quote unquote, when you go to an indoor theater, but it's indoor theaters like you guys that are really preserving the same thing that the Mahoning preserves, which is the experience of going to see cinema.
Yeah, the experience between a drive-in or a classic house like ours and the modern cinema today. Your modern cinemas are about 125, 150 seats,
Yep.
and the cinemas rarely fill up. If we have a silent film night and we're doing 300 plus people, the
Yeah.
audience reaction carries you. It's the wave of laughter. If you're in a drive-in and you know you're surrounded with people, you talk to people during intermission. Do you guys still do the 15-minute intermission?
Oh yeah. Yep. 10-minute countdown clock at least. All built in. The snipes beforehand with the pick ads and Rico's nachos. All has that appeal.
That's lovely because that was my favorite time. You'd get a break between the movies and you'd eat. My father,
Yes,
I used to
right.
think, had an endless wallet when it came to the snack bar.
Yep, I always say half the fun of going to the drive-in is the food. I can still remember like you said, the experiences as a kid, like floating like Pepe Le Pew into the concession stand.
Yeah, that's a good image.
Oh yeah. Speaking of showmanship, we actually have gone the extra step together for our show on February 8th. We're going to have vendors there, which is going to be a real treat. And some of our regular vendors will be there, which we're really excited about. Definitely gives that Mahoning flair. Is that something you guys do often? Is, like you said, try to add that extra layer of icing?
You'll find that we do the vendors a couple of times a year,
Yep.
but you'll find that with your experience, the vendors generally carry material that's related to the film experience.
Oh yeah.
I've
Yep.
seen T-shirts. I've seen people purchase things that they just want a part of the experience to bring back with them.
Yeah.
Vendors are a terrific way of doing it.
Well, I don't want to take up all of your time. I'm going to have Mark ask you some questions as well. So excited for this show. I mean, again, the whole idea behind this was to connect with like-minded folks and widen that light that we've been blessed to have shined on us. So we couldn't be happier.
So, question, you mentioned the book that you've written. What for you was the or were the drive-ins that you remember going to?
In Woodbridge, we had the Woodbridge Drive-In, which was a Walter Reed theater, terrific, terrific theater. We had the South Amboy Drive-In, which was right at the base of the Parkway. I don't know how many times some of your listeners might recall riding the Parkway and seeing the screen. You could visually see it from the Parkway. We also had, again, the next town over, Plainfield Edition Drive-In. And the interesting thing about the Plainfield Edition Drive-In is, as you know, with your drive-in, the area behind the snack bar is no parking because you can't see the screen because of the snack bar on a drive-in with a center snack bar setup.
Yeah.
Right.
So what happened is the two brothers who owned the theater decided they were going to put an indoor theater. So you could use the parking behind the snack bar, and the indoor theater was built on the back of the snack bar. So it was the Plainfield Edison Indoor-Outdoor Drive-In Theater.
Awesome.
And before they closed, it was eventually the indoor theater was twinned. And what I've never seen before was the drive-in was also twinned. They angled the screen, so depending on what screen you parked in front of was the movie you saw that night.
Wow.
Do you have any specific memories of films that you saw at those drive-ins?
Oh, without a doubt. And I've got to tell you, one of the last films I saw in a drive-in was Night of the Living Dead. My father had driven me. I was about 15, 14, in that general area. And Walter Reed Theaters were the only ones that were showing it. At the time, it hadn't been rated, so according to the MPPA, it was an X-rated film, even though we know what it contains.
Yeah.
So the Walter Reed Drive-In was the only place I could see it. And I remember going in with my father, and now you're talking about a mature 14, 15-year-old. I had to sleep with the lights on that night. Totally freaked me out when I saw it. And for anybody watching the 80s films, it's really soft today. It's really not a lot. But at the time I saw it, I think it was the worst thing I ever saw from a horrific standpoint. But I enjoyed every moment.
It's funny. That's one of the things we ask everybody who's on this show is, do you have any specific drive-in memories, and do you remember any films you saw at the drive-in? And the vast majority of the people have no memory of what they saw specifically. They just remember the feeling of going to the drive-in. So it's always exciting when somebody has those really crystal clear memories of seeing a specific film or specific incidents that happened when they were younger. I mean, some people are lucky enough to still have local drive-ins, but for the most part, they really only exist in clusters in a few states. I know New York has a lot, Pennsylvania has a lot, Ohio has a lot, but most other places, urban development just overtook the drive-ins. That's what happened in my hometown and the one that Virgil.
And it's very hard. You need so many people to go to a drive-in to make the property viable with the amount of development that's going on today.
I mean, we're lucky that we are still sort of in the middle of nowhere, and we draw from such a large radius. Literally, it seems weird to say, but it's true. Really, all over the country, people come to see our shows. So, if it was just the locals, we might not be around anymore. But the fact that we've been able to hook into this retro 35 millimeter thing, it's been really great, and we're excited to be able to attempt to replicate that at UCPAC on the 8th of February with that double feature. For people who don't know, the way we do these is, for this show, the doors will open early. The doors will open at 5:30, so people can come in and socialize, and there'll be a bar, and there'll be themed vendors who are selling, as far as I know, they'll be selling physical media and horror memorabilia and old movie posters and things like that. Virgil and I will have a table there where we're selling Mahoning. There's a Mahoning tour shirt that we just announced today, actually, like a concert shirt with all the dates. UCPAC is on the back. And we'll have a poster and Mahoning stuff, and we'll talk with people. I mean, part of what you were saying earlier, part of the thrill and excitement and success of the drive-in, and ours in particular, is the social aspect. Yeah, I always say every night is like a concert or a convention. We're all there for this thing that we love. Everybody at UCPAC that night either loves drive-ins or loves the FOG and or PHANTASM. So this is where you get together and you talk about that stuff. And we'll take the stage beforehand and we'll do an intro. We'll talk about the history of drive-ins. We'll talk about the history of our drive-in. We'll talk a little bit about the movies. And then we turn it over to your projectionist up in the booth to run a reel of vintage drive-in snack bar ads and movie trailers that are from the year of that double feature, which was an actual double feature that played coast to coast in 1980. Avco Embassy was putting out John Carpenter's The Fog as a new movie, and they needed something to pair it with, so they paired it with their hit Phantasm from the previous year.
John Carpenter's The Fog and Phantasm. Just when you thought you were out of their grasp, they're back. The Fog has returned to prove that what you can't see won't hurt you. It will kill you. And Phantasm is back to kill you all over again. Two terrorific hits together to grab you. The Fog and Phantasm, rated R.
And between the films, we'll have a nice break where people can hit the vendors, hit the bathrooms, hit the snack bar, hit the bar, buy some more merch. And then we'll run one of our 10-minute intermission reels on 35 from our collection, and then it'll be on to the second movie of the night. So there are two movies that I love. They're two movies that we tend to do very well with when we play them, but we've never played them together in that original double feature. So when we were talking with the folks at UCPAC about what we could run, I suggested that, and they seemed to like the idea. And a lot of people are really excited about this show. I've been to UCPAC. It's an amazing theater. And I'm hoping we can get a lot of Mahoning people who have never been to your theater before to come out and get hooked like I am on how amazing a place it is.
Yeah, I would love to see that. We're expecting a fairly good size attendance that night. The interesting thing you're talking about, the social aspect, 35 millimeter also seems to get into people's blood. It's such a warmer feel than electronic or digital.
Oh, yeah.
And people who follow 35 millimeter, it's like you're talking about the social aspect. It's like you're in a room full of people that you know, even though you might just be meeting them for the first time. The shared experience, the 35 millimeter, the drive-in or the hard top like we have, people just love that communal feeling.
Yeah.
It's a very strong aspect. I always say I've never been to a place that's easier to make friends as the Mahoning, because like I say, you all have that common love, whether it's films in general or a 35 millimeter. And yeah, there are people who travel to see movies specifically because they're on 35 millimeter, because they've never seen them that way, because they understand that that piece of plastic that light is shining through is probably the same piece of plastic that audiences saw that film through when the film was first released. You know, it's a way to connect with the past in physical form.
I'm sure the prints you're using are probably dated to that era. I know the thing that amazed me one month is we ran The Godfather, and it was an archival print. It's just amazing that some of these prints were struck in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and they're still circulating, and they still look very good.
I think ours will be what we usually refer to as grindhouse prints. So they'll look good, but they probably will have what we call warm color, some scratches here and there. But a lot of people like that. That's the vibe.
Yeah, but that's what I was talking about the feeling. You don't have that mechanical digital look. You have a live film look. You refer to them as grindhouse. We used to call them scratch house prints. Which they would use those for the dollar movie theaters, or a full carload of movie fans to a drive-in for $1.50. They would use the scratch house prints. But today, to see it on film, the worn print gives it that film flavor.
And you'll also have the original releasing company logo at the front of the film, which those get replaced over the years. That's the thing that as a film fan always would bug me when I would watch a James Bond movie on video and they would put the most recent UA logo up front. And I'm like, that's not the logo it should be. And when you see the original prints, you get the way they were presented when they first came out. I often say if I'm seeing a print that's less than pristine, I just say in my mind, I'm seeing this third on the bill at a drive-in that is using this to fill out an all-nighter a couple of years after the film originally was released. And you get into the spirit of it that way.
I've got to tell you, the thing you're talking about, when I was a kid and we used to go to the drive-in, I used to watch for the black Q mark at
Oh,
the
yeah.
end of the reel. And you would see the first black Q mark come up. And no matter what the movie is, you would turn to look at the projection booth in the drive-in and watch the projectors switch.
Right.
And you would do that about 5 times during each movie, but it made us feel like we were a part of something that was going on. I've been a film collector, my goodness, since I was about 11 or 12 years old.
So you have a private collection?
Yeah, I have a private collection. At one time, when I was a little kid, about 11 years old, I went to a firehouse and they were running $1 million legs on 16 millimeter.
Oh,
And I
wow.
walked up to the man who was running it and I said, "Where do you get these?" He says, "You buy them." So I went, "Ma, I need a projector." And that started me on the film collecting. And that,
Beautiful.
again, when I saw the silent films and the sound films at Union County Performing Arts Center, I just figured I got to be a part of this. And it's such a
Absolutely.
great organization, like your drive-in. It's keeping the spirit going. And this is what film was intended to do. It wasn't meant to be watched on a small telephone in your house. It was
Yeah.
meant to be shared on a wide screen with an audience.
That's what's so beautiful about it. We always say if there aren't houses like us and the places we're going to visit, it would be a dead format. So it's so essential nowadays.
Oh yeah, you guys are fighting, we're fighting to keep the circulation going. And there are new films. Oppenheimer was one that came out on film. A number of new films where the directors insist on the quality of film versus digital.
Yeah, I do love that there is this shift of some modern directors that that's their medium, that's their format.
I mean, as we speak, I believe one of our projectionists, Robert, is working at the Philadelphia Film Society Center in Philly, projecting The Brutalist on 70 millimeter.
Wow, that's lovely. That's nice. That's quite a talent to work as a projectionist on either 35 or 70. It's something that you acquire. The changeovers between the reels are generally non-existent to the audience, but there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scene.
They always
Yeah.
say if nobody notices anything that they've done their job correctly.
That's correct.
Who do you guys have running your film up in the booth?
Our house projectionist is Mark Pasillo. We were
And-
talking about the theater I went to as a child, the State Theater.
Yeah.
Mark's father was the house projectionist for the State Theater. Mark has, I believe, 49 years in as a projectionist, and he's worked a good chunk of the movie theaters here in central New Jersey. He also runs 35 millimeter and 70 millimeter in Manhattan.
Amazing.
Wow.
It's that history. That's what I love about doing this is not only do we get to step into a historic location, but we're finding out the history of the area. And, you know, you having such a history in the area is kind of this added perk. I mean, I'm curious, the birthplace of the drive-in, New Jersey, your childhood growing up with so many drive-ins. What was it like to kind of see these places slowly close? Did you find like the whole landscape shifted in the area, or did it have everything to do with industrialization and being kind of built up?
This is going to sound funny, but it's very similar to a question that they must have asked the person after 20 years of owning an automobile if they missed the horse. The horse was wonderful. It was a companion. It was great, dependable. These drive-ins that we saw close, the Woodbridge Drive-In, they built a department store there and made a small hardtop. The Edison Drive-In was demolished to make a small strip mall, fairly deep with a supermarket. And the Perth Amboy, South Amboy Drive-In lasted probably the longest, but it was torn down to make what was originally a 6-theater cinema, which eventually became a 14-theater theater. And it was torn down probably about a year ago after being vacant for about 15 years. So in one spot, there's rubble. In 2 spots, there's shopping centers. It takes all the warmth out of a community. It really does.
Yeah, our childhood drive-in, same situation. Mine's a Target. Mark's, what's yours? A strip mall now?
It was originally a Kmart, and then that went out of business, and now I believe it is a Hobby Lobby.
Yeah, where the Woodbridge Drive-In was, became a EJ Corvettes, and then was taken over by Caldors, and gradually became a ShopRite supermarket. So it's stores that you see every place. Each drive-in has its individual character.
Yeah.
Each drive-in, for the most part, they were built independently. They were just so local, the drive-ins were. And the theater's the same. We had the gentleman who created our theater back in 1928. It's not a deep theater, it's a wide theater. There's no bad seats in the house. And it's just a different feeling when you're in that theater versus the cinder block theater of today. The old theaters, the old drive-ins, you really have to support them while they're still going, and you really have to experience them if you've never done before.
God bless.
There is a question I ask of all our guests, and that is, if you had the ability, regardless of the financial ruin that might come out of these decisions, to program a night or a weekend at the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, what films would you show?
Wow. That is honestly a hard one. I for whatever reason, I would love to see a Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead trilogy, because I just happen to love George Romero's work.
We did that last year. We should have had you come out.
Oh, I wish I had known. I would have flown there. I had driven there as fast as I could. And yeah, I think that would be my number one for a trilogy at a drive-in. And then again, when I was a kid, we saw in the drive-in, you're talking about memories, Bill Haley's Rock Around the Clock.
Wow.
And it must have been 10 years old, 12 years old when we saw it. And it was incredible, even with that tiny speaker, to hear the rock music that you listen to on the radio and watch the live performers. You were talking about memories. That's another film I remember seeing at a drive-in.
Oh, it's so beautiful. And that's what it's about. It really is trying to preserve these memories, give people the opportunity to make these memories, new memories. And we know it. These partnerships that we're creating are going to go such a long way. It's all about connecting the communities, bringing our fan bases together. So mark your calendars, guys, February 8th. Before we let you go, Irv, can you let the folks know where they can find out more about the theater, whether it's social media or website or anything like that?
Well, we do have a Facebook site. They're constantly posting on Instagram. But again, your best place for an education, including some of the history of the theater, is ucpac.org. That's for Union County Performing Arts Center, ucpac.org. And the other place, which I'm sure you guys are aware of, which I find really interesting, is Cinema Treasures.
Oh, yeah.
Cinema Treasures has some real interesting.
Yeah, Mark uses it when he's in town. He'll pop it up to look and see what classic theaters were in the area, you know?
I had a couple of friends come over from England, and one of the men that came over writes a lot of the British for Cinema Treasures. And we found theaters that I never knew were theaters. It was incredible. There was a theater in Carteret, New Jersey, a small theater, which is now a deli, if you can imagine, a convenience store deli, and it must have had 20 seats. And if you go to my book, we had what was called the Monument Theater. And the Monument Theater showed movies on a Thursday night. This is back in the teens where they probably had to hand crank the projector. Yeah. They showed movies on a Thursday night, and they folded up the seats and had dances on a Saturday night. So it's... going one further, when the State Theater opened in Woodbridge, their shows on Sunday in New Jersey weren't allowed, or particularly for Woodbridge weren't allowed. So they knew they had to open 7 days to make the cost of the theater. So they petitioned the town, and they ran the 10 Commandments as their first movie, and nobody complained. So the next week they ran Ben-Hur. and since it had a
Amazing.
biblical aspect, and that broke the Sunday ban on movies here in New Jersey or in
Yeah, it's like
Woodbridge, New
I
Jersey.
dare you to say something about Ten Commandments.
Yeah, that to me is humorous. The
Yeah,
history
that's
of these places, the fact you're preserving the drive-in, especially for the amount of years it's been there, I think is fantastic. I got to credit you too, and I'm glad you included us in your road
absolutely.
show.
Well, that's what it's all about, is really most drive-ins are family owned, passed down the generations, but that's what we're finding with every stop on this tour. That's the case with all these indoor houses and preservation houses is it's a community and places that need to be supported. So we're feeling so blessed to be able to connect with you guys and put on the show. Before I say goodbye to you, you've mentioned the book a couple times. Is there a place where people can go and find this book and still get it?
Oh yeah, Amazon has copies, paperback, hardcover, and it's actually available in Kindle. It's called Life and Death of a Movie Theater, and it's written by myself, Irv Hyatt, but I write under the name of Joseph Hyatt, Hyatt. But it is available. It's also available as a Kindle book, and it's on Amazon.com.
Oh my gosh. We could talk for days. The passion comes through so amazingly. It's such an inspiration. I think more than anything, that's what I'm so excited about with this tour is connecting with you guys, filling our spirit and our souls up, and taking on this season, in a big bad way.
It should be a gorgeous night. I look forward to seeing you guys there.
Absolutely. And we'll see all of you guys out there again, February the 8th, doors at 5:30. We're going to kick things off with the FOG at 7 o'clock and Phantasm at 9 o'clock. Match Made in Heaven, UCPAC, and the Mahoning Drive-In Theater cannot wait. And on that note, Jeff, take it away, my friend.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for coming out tonight to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater. We hope you'll come back and see us again real soon. The exit is on the right-hand side of the screen at the front of the field, and most importantly, have a very safe trip home. Good night, and God bless you.